the State Department of Education sent someone to provide a test and then the results. And he pulled my parents into one room and I sat separately in the other room was he was giving the results. However, what he didn't know is I could hear them through the door. A lot of it I didn't understand at 7 years old, but what I did understand and what was clear to me was when he said, Josh probably won't graduate high school and don't count on college. And then wondering if what I heard was correct was confirmed by my mom breaking down and crying in the next room. And that plagued me, honestly, for the rest of my life. And I never told my parents that I heard him say that because I didn't want to be a burden to them. I knew I was already going to be a burden, and I didn't want to be more of a burden.
Yeah. Yeah. Life. Can't bring the horns in.
Taking in the moment. And see what tomorrow brings. Too less to stress the BS. But don't get carried away.
It's been too long,
It's a
homie.
new day. And a new me.
Yeah.
I said it's a new day. And a new me.
Ain't lying.
So most people look at this and they think it's squiggles, but if you take an eye, a beak, a tail, and 2 feet, you can change the squiggles into something different because the human brain is fantastic at making connections. So say here, you do an eye, a beak, 2 feet, and a tail. You have birds. I was asked if I could do a creative thinking workshop at the Diversity Symposium at work for the People with Disabilities Network. And I had been a member of the People with Disabilities Network, but I had never shared why. I kind of just sat back and observed from a distance to make sure it was safe for me to share, because I'm a learning leader, and it's kind of ironic that you have a learning leader with a severe learning disability or difference. And I didn't want it to kind of block my progression. So I was having a conversation with the lady that asked me, and I said, okay, let me tell you a little bit about myself, because if I'm gonna do this, I wanna do it right. I had started to get emotional because I had hid this for so long, and it's so deep down core of who I am, but I've never shared it. So I feel like I've been hiding a major part of me.
Dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and/or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. Dyslexia affects as much as 20% of the population. The impact that dyslexia has is different for each person and depends on the severity of the condition and the effectiveness of remediation.
I didn't really know that you had reading issues when you were little until you were in school.
Some of the signs of dyslexia and what that kind of looks like, usually those students are identified when they are in kindergarten or preschool, when they're having difficulties with phonemic awareness, recognizing what the sounds in words are. Because we start working on those things in kindergarten, that's usually when it's diagnosed. And sometimes it isn't picked up until later on in high school.
All the reading classes, history, I struggled, but just because my mother was a teacher there, the teachers would make an extra effort to help me in those classes.
It is estimated that 30% of those with dyslexia have coexisting ADHD. ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is a behavioral condition that is characterized by inattention, distractibility, hyperactivity, and impulsivity.
At an early age, I just thought, I don't know, there was no label for it, but I knew I just had attention deficit, right? Like it was, it was like, man, teachers would be like, he's fine, he's a really great student, but he goes off into his own world and he kind of does his own thing.
I remember being in the hallway with the teacher and we were talking, and then you just burst out in tears and ran up to me and said, I miss you. I don't want to go to school.
Children that are dyslexic get it. They're smart enough to know, I am not getting this like other people in the class are. This is causing me grief and effort and strain, and I don't understand why.
It can interfere with social interaction, their memory, or dealing with stress, because those are all things that when you're speaking or trying to understand something and it doesn't come into your brain as you read it, that's difficult.
If you can't read well, you don't want to read, so you don't. And you start falling behind academically with everything. Because you're not reading all the good information you could be learning, but that includes vocabulary. That includes all the wonderful background knowledge that you need for all your other subjects. And then as soon as you start seeing unfamiliar science words and social studies words, well, then there go those subjects too. Emotionally, you're drained, you're tired. School takes so much effort.
You were coming home from school very frustrated, very tired, and it wasn't from lack of paying attention or trying.
When you see other kids, they can read like well, and then it's just when you see different words, you can't code them right.
There was this level of anxiety that it took me so much longer to take a test than everyone else. I was like, either they're guessing or they're like super smart and I'm just an idiot. And I just got freaked out by tests, mainly because I was embarrassed by how long it took me. Less of that I didn't know the content. It was just like, why is this taking me so long?
When a lot of people think of dyslexia, they think of like dumb or stupid, and that's like completely the opposite.
People with dyslexia are not lacking in motivation or intelligence. In fact, they are typically average to above average in intelligence.
There were times where if I knew the teacher was going to go this row, read one paragraph, then this row, read one paragraph, then this row, read one paragraph, and I was the fifth person, then I'd be like, okay, what's the fifth paragraph? And I'd quickly read it 3 or 4 times before it got to me, so that when I did read it, I had it halfway memorized, so that I could read it maybe a little bit slower and get through it.
And in those situations where you're having to read aloud, students do get anxious, obviously, when they have to do that in front of their peers.
If I knew there was like a reading assignment that day, I'd either play sick or like run late from another class so I can avoid it. But I knew I was doing things to avoid things. I just didn't know why.
And other kids can be mean. It's like, oh, there's something broken or there's something wrong with you. And wrong usually equals cooties at that age. And it's like, oh, he has cooties, stay away from him. So it was hard as a kid making friends. And then that opens you up to bullies.
Since you told me about the bullying, I feel like I let you down somehow.
Not at all. You and Dad were fantastic. When I was talking to Dad, I had shared a paper that he had edited or proofread, and he didn't recall it. And it wasn't a big deal to him. But to me, if you guys didn't spend the time that you did, then I never would have graduated high school, let alone going on to college. So
yeah,
I'm very grateful for everything that you guys did.
Yeah, good. Okay, I'm better.
Okay.
If you are young and you're looking around and everybody else is doing faster and better, and there's only one thing you can think, something's wrong with me. And the only summation is, you're not sick, right? It's not like, oh, I've got an illness. You say, I must be dumb. What starts happening with children that are that smart, nobody wants to be called dumb. So what happens is you start wanting to be called something else. So I'm going to be disruptive. I'm going to be bad.
There were a couple times where the teacher was like, all right, Josh, read this next paragraph. And it's a big paragraph and it's too big to laugh my way through. I'd literally say, you know what, I got a bad headache right now. Can you skip me, or can I read a smaller paragraph later? And if the teacher was like, no, I want you to read this paragraph, I'm like, no, I have a headache, I'm not reading it. And they're like, either read the paragraph or go to the principal's office.
I'd rather be called bad than dumb. So yeah, let me do that.
And I'd literally stand up and I'd high five people on my way out the door to go to the principal's office.
Or either I'm gonna start becoming the clown. I'm gonna make everybody laugh. And that's a good way for me to get some attention. It takes the focus off of my disability. Even if it's gonna get me in trouble, I'd rather be known as the funny guy or the clown than dumb. Anything but dumb.
There was never just a knucklehead for the sake of being a knucklehead. It was kind of like a class clown.
The humor, what I know now as having no boundaries and oversharing, that was a coping mechanism that continued into adulthood that I'm still trying to fix. You feel like you've given all of yourself that is socially acceptable, being nice, being kind, being intelligent, and that's not working. So then you use the humor.
I don't know if I would have been a class clown had it not been for dyslexia. I definitely wouldn't have gone and visited the principal for refusing to read out loud if I didn't have dyslexia. And so there's any persona that you can take on that works for you other than dumb, a kid's gonna do it.
I think kids never want to be in a category. I think you just want to be one of the masses, or be unique in special ways, either athletics or academics or whatever, but you don't want to be unique for something else.
Dyslexia can't be cured. It is lifelong. But with the right supports, dyslexic individuals can become highly successful students and adults.
I would think the biggest misconception is that there's something wrong with them. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong. It's just the way that their brain is operating to understand that information. So we just have to learn the different ways that we need to give them the information.
The way that the brain works, of course, is that there's a neural pathway that's broken for dyslexics. We know this now because of the brain research. But even when we didn't know it, we knew we could remediate children's reading and make the process easier. The only thing you have to do with a dyslexic brain in order for them to succeed in school is you need to get them reading, and you need, as parents, to keep their confidence up, because school will be the hardest thing that they have to do.
And school is just this short little part of your life that when you're in it and that's all you've known as a child, it's really hard to picture yourself 10, 15 years in the future, in the workforce, thriving, because your brain works in such a beautiful way that can solve all these problems, think really big, share your messages by just quickly doodling something and having visuals, and you're highly adaptive, you thrive in change, which are things that other people that aren't dyslexic and have been in a box their whole life get scared of. So everything that used to make you have fears and anxiety, you thrive in later on in life, and then the others have the fears and the anxiety. And that's why anybody that has dyslexia is honestly blessed with dyslexia. What would you rather have more of? Because 40% of self-made millionaires have dyslexia. 40 to 50% of prisoners have dyslexia.
I was headed down the wrong path until teachers helped me.
There were several times I was headed down the wrong path, and the one person that I always go to is my dad.
My high school science teacher pulled me off the wrong path by giving me two options. See, I'd played a practical joke the day before and I took it too far. He pulled me into the hallway and he said, option one, use the creativity skills and leadership skills that you demonstrated in that practical joke and put them to good use. And option two was he'd expel me. If you don't help dyslexic kids be better, do better, read, it's going to end up with prisoners. If you help dyslexic kids to read and you help dyslexic kids to get through schools, then they're going to be those self-made millionaires. What would you rather have more of?
Now, if you ask a lot of dyslexics who've struggled through school, there's a good chance that they may say, I don't want to be dyslexic. It was too hard. It's real. I don't want that for anybody. If you ask me, I'm going to say, no way. I've hung out with these kids and these adults that are dyslexic, and they bring something very special to the world.
It's a different way of looking at the world that anybody can do. You don't just have to be dyslexic. The dyslexics just happen to be the fortunate ones that get to do it all the time naturally.
Extracurricular activities are especially important for students with learning disabilities and differences. These offerings provide them with the opportunities to succeed beyond the formal learning environment.
Sewing helps me get things off my mind, and I've seen a bunch of plays before, like The Lion King, and these costumes have like these technology, which is really cool.
I've always been interested in theater arts.
All the extracurricular things that you did, volunteering to teach PE at the grade school level when the program was cut, the sports, and the other things you did with student council and all of that.
It's fun to hang out with dyslexics, especially if you're not dyslexic, because trust me, they will come up with the fun thing to do.
She's trying to cross the room on the floor. We're two big goofballs. Okay, so
the quintessential Josh story would be inventing games. And there's always a release that's needed, mentally you just go, and you need a break. And Josh is notorious for, let's try something.
Your employee has signed up for a learning class. Why did Josh?
Oh, it's awakened. Be careful.
Yellow.
Oh, another one. Many ferocious beasts around these places.
I always had to reteach myself everything I knew and look at it from 7 different perspectives until it clicked and it made sense. But what I had learned over time is that I can find these gaps and I have a different perspective of looking at things. And when I look at things from a different perspective and a different angle, I'm like, wait, if we look at it from this way, we can maximize the profit, we can minimize the risk, and it makes sense. So I would bring these things up to bosses, and if the boss was cool and open-minded, then they're like, oh great, let's try that. So my career was based off of tweaking and testing and changing. And honestly, when you grow up with dyslexia, you fail all the time. You get used to failure. So testing and learning is second nature.
I knew that me to read a book and sit down and read like a chapter was probably 2-3 times longer than someone else who could just read it. And I was like, I don't want to spend 3 hours when it takes someone else 30 minutes. I would find combinations of things. If I watch the movie, I read the Cliff Notes, and I read the last chapter and the first chapter, then I should be able to get a C. And that's what I did. And that's kind of how I got through high school and large part college, right? I would find ways to get around not having to read the whole text because of the length of time it would take me.
I love coming in at the beginning stage of schematic brainstorming because that's when the ADHD, I let it fly and do its thing. You just go from thought to thought that is related, and you end up somewhere loosely related from where you started, but still pertinent, and you may have found solutions along the way. It's the perfect job or task for someone that's neurodivergent because they're able to quickly switch left to right and see the future.
You don't live in a box. There is no box when you're dyslexic.
Dyslexic strengths for core work skills of the future include visualizing, imagining, communicating, exploring, connecting, and reasoning.
Instead of creating a box around your ideas, he just removes the walls.
And he's always questioning things and always looking at things through a different lens and how might we change things.
It's from the dyslexia, right? That's what has made these amazing thinkers become these amazing thinkers.
I learned to ask for help early on. So I watched with a pretty keen eye to see who was good at what that I was comfortable with, to say, hey, can you help proofread this? And then I'd find other people that were good at other things that I wasn't that great at. But then in return, I would say, hey, can I help you with this creative thinking? Can I help you with looking at your project differently?
You know, one of the first things he said when I joined the team is he asked, what do I like doing and what don't you like doing? And he pre-qualified it before he even said any, before you answer, let me tell you, the reason why I asked you this is, let's say you hate doing spreadsheets and you love facilitating. Believe it or not, that's not every single person in the world.
They would utilize their strength to help me be better, and I would utilize my strength to help them be better.
That was one of the biggest, differences he made, is making me kind of reframe how I looked at my strengths and my weaknesses, and really just honing in on those strengths, knowing that other people are strong in areas where I'm not. And that's what, when you have a team of people with different strengths, that's what really makes that team successful.
I can teach creative thinking to people. I actually went back to school and got my master's degree in design management from SCAD.
Josh and I got connected because he was doing a project for grad school and needed to do some analysis and wanted to do a case study on the YMCA.
My concentration was instructional design on how do I take all these artistic and abstract tools and methodologies that they're teaching us in design school and apply that back to corporate everybody, from engineers to mathematicians to economists to marketing.
Dyslexics bring something to the table, something that this world needs and really what we should want. And many, many businesses are discovering that. They want these brains, they want these out-of-the-box thinkers.
We are ecstatic that a guy like Josh, with a background in learning and development, and was already coming from the inside from our corporate learning and development group, was excited and willing to come join us on that journey and sort of start from scratch and develop a marketing curriculum.
I was honestly shocked because, like I said, before then I probably knew Josh for at least 2 years and never had any idea that he was dyslexic at all.
Then I think when you have hidden disabilities, there are people who don't want that support, right? So, let's just say I may identify it, but I have to be respectful enough to, one, ask, wait for them to, well, there's two things, either wait for them to talk to me about it, or two, ask them if I can provide any kind of support respectfully, right?
When I was in the government, I definitely hit it. I don't know what the word is for it, but it's, you want to almost show no weakness. As I got out of the federal government and went into financial institutions, I probably still hit it probably up until 5-6 years ago.
I've worked for 4 different Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 200 companies. And It was only through PDN, People with Disabilities Network, that I was finally comfortable to share at work that I have dyslexia.
When Josh shared his story at a PDN kickoff, only thing I could say is we were passing the tissue box. It was heartfelt, it was authentic, and it was very brave of him. And it was in a time where I think we were all very grateful, because what that did is that it opened up others to tell their story.
So when I did it and people saw, oh, he jumped and he's okay, and in fact, people caught him and supported him and raised him up for jumping, I want to jump too. I know the freedom that it gave me, so I'm hoping that they feel the same freedom that I felt from sharing.
I've definitely felt alone in my journey with ADHD, and I've never, to the point where I've never felt comfortable sharing it until Josh was my manager. And it was just something that I kept buried deep down. I tried medication and I felt I lost a large part of who I was as a person. And so I stopped taking it. It was just something that I dealt with silently and avoided, and didn't want to bring the surface. I didn't want it to define me. And really, leveraging Josh and his experience to help manage that, I think together we did a really good job of that.
School failure attributed to environmental factors or intelligence is often undiagnosed dyslexia.
My daughter got diagnosed with dyslexia when she was in first grade, and so Josh and I were connected at that time, so it really kind of became a common uniter for us and connection.
And that's when I learned that the public school system's doing the same thing to kids now that they did when I was a kid.
It's pretty common within public schools, a lot of it is they feel like we are doing the best we can. We've got this big population and we want to provide, the keyword of FAPE, right? The acronym, free and appropriate public education, free and appropriate. And I know that we have a lot of well-meaning people that are trying so hard to do that for these kids. It's not happening.
I just look at the challenges we've had raising your daughter in the school, where teachers aren't equipped with the ability to detect it or to figure out strategies for each child once they know that.
I do think that the school systems do the best that they can with serving our students with dyslexia.
We love the school district we're in, and we love the elementary school that she was at when they diagnosed her in second grade. But I wasn't real happy with their response to her dyslexia diagnosis. They did provide the testing, and they had a reading specialist in the district provide the testing, but we never got to meet with that reading specialist. So I was given the results of the test, but it was up to me to kind of make sense of that. I think she's covering like a lot of different schools in the school district. I think she just doesn't have the time for that, is what I was told.
Unfortunately, the information has not disseminated down to where, the policymakers, the curriculum coordinators, the curriculum companies, the publishers, they're not changing it as fast as they need it. But there's a grassroots movement among these teachers that are like, we want this information, where do we get it?
We have fabulous teachers who do the extra mile and really put in the work to work with our students.
Teachers, yeah, they're the people that we should really be supporting and paying attention to.
I cannot believe the commitment of the public school teachers I have worked with. They see this as a mission just like I have. They want to do nothing but help these kids. I think the main thing is to realize that for dyslexics, the issue is not really a problem with them. It's more of a problem with society and how we teach reading. And they can learn how to read. and they can learn how to read well. But we are going to have to change our methodology in order to do that.
So as a kid where I couldn't read that well, I turned to comic books. Dyslexics have great visual minds, and I loved all the visuals in the comics, and because I could understand the story and what's going on without having to read anything. If you've ever watched an X-Men movie and you just think the mutants are the dyslexics and how they have to rebel and how they feel and how they're ashamed of their mutant powers at first before they find Professor X, and Professor X has to discover and develop and hone in on those skills and turn them into superpowers and believe in these kids. It's all the same thing. And that metaphor of the X-Men and dyslexia in society, it just blew my mind when I watched it. If you want a different way of looking at dyslexia and how it feels and how it looks and be entertained at the same time, watch an X-Men movie. Because how those mutant kids feel and are treated by society is a lot how I felt and how I felt I was treated by society when I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And luckily for me, I was able to turn it into a superpower and be blessed with dyslexia.
For parents, I say, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Congratulations, you have a dyslexic child. Their brains are meant for the world. They're so bright, they're so innovative, they're so creative, they think outside the box.
Whenever I picture something moving, I can almost flip it around in my head. I know how it'll turn out.
When you're testing like an application, or you're looking at cyber intel, or you're looking at data sets to find sort of anomalies and other things, they seem to find those glitches faster. They run through because maybe they see the pattern in a different way and they're not focused on like the every bit and the every byte. So like debugging software, understanding flaws in software, just recognizing patterns is really unique.
You're able to think of these solutions that won't work. You're actually clairvoyant in the design process when you're thinking of everything that can go right and everything that can go wrong. You're problem solving in seeing where a design that may look great right now could potentially not work in the future or for what this person wants.
When I found out that a child is dyslexic, I know what it means. I've been around long enough. I've seen what happens with children that are dyslexic from when they come to elementary school all the way until now. Many adults that I taught that are having children come back and get good remediation. I'm able to speak to them about their experiences, which is so much fun.
I can approach dyslexia now with a sense of pride, and if anybody questions that, I can tell them a million different ways how it's helped benefit my life.
One of the things that I love doing in cybersecurity is non-technology executives, getting them to understand cybersecurity, right? And understand why is this important for you? Neurodiversity folks, right? Understand the challenges when someone doesn't get something and almost automatically can put themselves in that person's shoes. We leverage empathy in ways that maybe others don't because of our situation. And then it's easier for us to get there, right, with them, right? Where others people may go, they just don't get it, so I'll just move on to someone else that does.
I've seen so many kids come through the doors and go on to be successful. It is astounding.
Only have expectations for yourself and do your best to live up to those expectations and fulfill those commitments to yourself. Forget everybody else.
I want to reframe how people think about it. If you embrace your strengths and your superpowers, there is no limit. You think differently, and that's fantastic. You have a diversity of thought, and that's fantastic. You know how to overcome obstacles, and that's fantastic. Everything that has been a struggle in your life, or everything that will be a struggle in your life, is only preparing you to be that much more successful and to conquer the world that much greater in the future.
If you, your child, your students, or your employees are blessed with dyslexia, here's how to help. Become an advocate, share this video, teach anyone willing to listen the basics of dyslexia, and participate in facilitated neurodiversity workshops. Also, understand the same reasons it's hard to read and write, become intertwined with why it's hard to make friends, feel understood, please others, and make good decisions. And if you're a neurodivergent person, first, know yourself. Know what you're good at, and know where you seem to run into problems, besides reading and writing. Most important, know what help others can provide that's best for you, and then tell them. Do not be ashamed, even though so many people along the way may have shamed you. Be empowered with knowledge because it is your responsibility to help build the world you seek to live in. As Maya Angelou said, when people know better, they do better.
Yeah. Life. Can't bring the heart in.
Taking in the moment. And see what tomorrow brings. Too less to stress the BS. But don't get carried away.
Spit too